The business has been sold, my uncle announced with a smug smile that didn't reach his eyes. Papers were signed yesterday. You have until the end of the week to clear out your office. The executives around the table avoided my gaze while Uncle Richard watched for my reaction, clearly expecting devastation. Instead, I smiled and pulled out my phone. That's interesting timing, I replied, because you should probably meet my investor, the one who now owns 51% of our parent company. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The boardroom of Harrington Precision Manufacturing fell silent. I glanced around at the familiar faces, board members with carefully neutral expressions, executives studying their notepads with sudden fascination, and Uncle Richard at the head of the table, barely containing his satisfaction. Sold? I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected given the bomb he'd just dropped. The entire company? Without board approval? As majority shareholder and CEO, I don't need board approval for asset sales, Richard replied, straightening his tie. With manicured fingers. Vertex Industrial made an excellent offer, one that recognizes the full value of what we've built. The deal includes generous severance packages for all senior management. His eyes fixed on me. Including you, Elizabeth. Including me. As if I were just another employee rather than family. As if I hadn't spent 12 years transforming our modest family machine shop into a precision manufacturing powerhouse. As if the Harrington name on the building didn't belong to me as much as to him. The executives around the table avoided my gaze while Uncle Richard watched for my reaction, clearly expecting devastation. Instead, I smiled and pulled out my phone. That's interesting timing, I replied, because you should probably meet my investor, the one who now owns 51% of our parent company. The color drained from Richard's face. What are you talking about? There is no parent company. Harrington Precision is the parent company. Actually, Harrington Holdings was established 3 years ago as the parent entity to Harrington Precision. It's been in all the corporate filings since then. I'm surprised you never noticed. I pressed a number on my phone and put it on speaker. Catherine? It's Elizabeth. Could you join us in the main boardroom? It seems Uncle Richard has attempted to sell the business. The silence in the room was deafening as everyone processed what was happening. Richard's expression morphed from confusion to fury. This is some kind of trick, he sputtered. There's no Harrington Holdings. This is my company. My father left it to me. Your father left 51% to you and 49%. To me, I corrected him. But ownership structures can change. Perhaps you should have paid more attention to the paperwork you've been signing for the past 3 years. The boardroom door opened, and Catherine Chen walked in, elegant, composed, and radiating the quiet confidence that had made her one of the most respected venture capitalists in the industry. I had met her 5 years earlier when seeking funding for our aerospace division expansion. Richard had dismissed her offer then, preferring traditional bank financing, but I had maintained the relationship independently. Ms. Chen, Richard said, rising to his feet with a politician's smile. There seems to be some confusion. No confusion, Mr. Harrington, Catherine interrupted, placing a leather portfolio on the table. 3 years ago, I acquired a controlling interest in Harrington Holdings, the parent company of Harrington Precision Manufacturing. The transaction was properly documented and filed with all relevant authorities. She paused, glancing at me before continuing. Elizabeth retained operational control of Harrington Precision as part of our agreement. My investment was specifically in the potential she demonstrated, not in the physical assets. Richard collapsed back into his chair, his face ashen. That's not possible. I would have known. The information was available in quarterly reports, annual financial statements, and corporate registry filings, Catherine replied. Elizabeth suggested making these disclosures prominent, but I believe your exact words were that you didn't have time for administrative minutia and that she should handle the paperwork while you focused on real business. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing those phrases as ones Richard had used repeatedly over the years to justify his inattention to details he considered beneath him. His dismissal of administrative minutia had become something of a running joke among the management team, one that had suddenly lost all humor. "So what does this mean for the sale?" asked Howard Bennett, our longest-serving board member. "It means," I said, "that Uncle Richard has attempted to sell assets he doesn't control. Harrington Precision is owned by Harrington Holdings, not by Richard personally. Any sale would require approval from the Holdings Board, which consists of Catherine, myself, and our corporate counsel. This is preposterous." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "I've run this company for 20 years. My father built it from nothing." "Your father built it," I agreed, "and you maintained it. But I'm the one who grew it from a $5 million regional machine shop to a $120 million precision manufacturing enterprise with aerospace and medical device divisions." I kept my voice calm, professional. "You've been taking credit for my innovations, my client relationships, and my strategic vision for years. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself?" The room fell into stunned silence as the implications settled over everyone present. Richard had always been the face of Harrington Precision, charming clients at industry events, giving interviews to trade publications, accepting awards. But those who worked closely with the business knew it was my product development roadmap, my quality control systems, and my client nurturing that had driven our growth. Richard had been taking bows for performances he hadn't orchestrated for years. "If I could direct everyone's attention to Section 3 of the documents I've distributed," Catherine said, breaking the silence, "you'll see the current ownership structure clearly outlined. Elizabeth and I had anticipated that this clarification might be necessary at some point, though we didn't expect it would involve an unauthorized sale attempt." "Is the sale to Vertex definitely void, then?" asked Diane Murray, our CFO, who had always been one of my strongest allies in the executive team. "That depends," I replied, glancing at Catherine, who nodded slightly. "We'll need to review the terms Richard agreed to. If they recognize the true value of the company and align with our strategic vision, we might choose to honor them. If not, they'll need to be renegotiated or canceled entirely." Richard finally found his voice again. "You can't do this, Elizabeth. It's not just underhanded, it's disloyal. To family." The word family from his lips nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. For 12 years, I had poured everything into Harrington Precision: my education, my creativity, my relationships, my nights and weekends. I had sacrificed a social life, postponed starting a family of my own, even ended a promising relationship, because my partner couldn't understand my devotion to the business, all while Richard treated me as little more than a useful employee, someone to handle the operational details while he played the role of visionary leader. "Loyalty goes both ways, Uncle Richard," I said quietly. "Did you consider family loyalty when you arranged to sell the company without even informing me? Were you planning to tell me before or after the clear out your office deadline?" His silence was answer enough. "I believe we should adjourn this meeting," Catherine suggested, "to give everyone time to review the documentation and consider next steps. I propose we reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 to discuss the path forward for Harrington Precision." As the board members and executives filed out, many casting uncertain glances between Richard and me, I remained seated. So did Catherine and Richard, creating a triangle of tension once the room had emptied. "How long have you been planning this?" Richard finally asked, his voice hollow. "I wasn't planning anything until I found the acquisition notes you accidentally left in the copier 3 years ago," I replied. "Notes about selling to Vertex specifically. Notes that outlined how you would manage the Elizabeth situation. by offering me a generous exit package once the deal was done. His eyes widened with recognition. That was just preliminary thinking. Nothing serious. It was serious enough for me to start protecting myself, I countered. Catherine had approached us about investment the year before, and you dismissed her without even a proper consideration. So I approached her independently with a different proposition. Catherine nodded. Elizabeth presented a compelling case for investing in a holding company structure that would protect the operational integrity of Harrington Precision while allowing for potential expansion into related fields. The fact that it also secured her position against arbitrary removal was a feature I particularly appreciated. Stable leadership is valuable to investors. So, what happens now? Richard asked, defeat evident in his posture. You force me out? Is that your grand revenge? Revenge isn't productive, I said, gathering my papers. Neither is forcing out someone with 20 years of industry connections and client relationships. What happens now is we restructure the leadership to accurately reflect who's doing what. You've always been excellent at client relations and industry networking. Those are real skills that benefit the company. But the operational and strategic decisions need to be mine officially, not just practically. And if I refuse? A hint of his usual defiance returned. Then we would need to discuss separation terms, Catherine replied matter-of-factly. Elizabeth has been tolerating a misalignment between contribution and recognition for years out of family loyalty. That arrangement is no longer sustainable, as your actions today have demonstrated. I stood, smoothing my skirt with hands that betrayed only the slightest tremor. Take the evening to think about it, Uncle Richard. We've worked together for 12 years. I'd prefer to find a way to continue that partnership on more equitable terms rather than severing it completely. As I walked out of the boardroom, the weight of the past 3 years, the careful planning, the legal consultations, the midnight worry sessions, the strategic documentation, finally began to lift. I had secured my position not through inheritance or favor, but through foresight and strategic thinking. The same qualities that had built Harrington Precision into an industry leader were the ones that had protected my place within it. My assistant, Marcus, was waiting in my office, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. I heard the meeting ended abruptly. Are we really being sold? Not if I have anything to say about it, I replied, allowing myself the first genuine smile of the day. And it turns out I have quite a lot to say on the matter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I never doubted it, he said with evident relief. What do you need from me right now? I checked my watch, 4:30 p.m. Cancel my remaining appointments. I need to prepare for tomorrow's board meeting. Also, could you call James in legal and ask him to bring me all the documentation we have on the Harrington Holdings structure? And any information he has about the proposed Vertex acquisition? As Marcus left to execute these requests, I moved to the window overlooking the manufacturing floor, where precision equipment hummed with activity. 3 generations of Harringtons had built this business, but I was the one who had transformed it from a struggling regional supplier into a specialized leader in aerospace and medical device components. I had earned my place here not by blood, but by vision and execution. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Dinner? We should discuss strategy for tomorrow. I typed back a quick confirmation, grateful for her steady presence in this tumultuous moment. Catherine had been more than an investor. She had become a mentor and ally in an industry still dominated by men who often mistook my technical knowledge for administrative support. The manufacturing floor below continued its precise choreography, unaware of the corporate drama that had just unfolded. That was exactly as it should be. Good leadership meant absorbing shocks at the top so that the operational heart of the business could continue beating steadily. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the contingency plans I had developed for various scenarios, including Richard's potential attempt to sell. Preparation wasn't paranoia, it was professionalism. Uncle Richard had always dismissed my attention to detail as excessive, my scenario planning as unnecessary, my documentation as busy work. Today had proven the value of all three. The file I needed was labeled Vertex Contingency, created 18 months earlier when industry rumors had first suggested they might be looking to acquire smaller precision manufacturers to fulfill their defense contracts. I had researched their acquisition history, corporate culture, and integration approaches. I had analyzed which parts of our business would interest them most and which they might divest. I had even drafted potential counteroffers and negotiation positions. Not because I wanted to sell, but because I believed in being prepared for any possibility. Uncle Richard had walked into his negotiation with Vertex armed with confidence and entitlement. I would walk into tomorrow's board meeting armed with data, analysis, and strategic options. As I reviewed my notes, a memory surfaced from my early days at Harrington Precision. My grandfather, Richard's father and the company founder, showing me around the shop floor when I was fresh out of engineering school. "Know what makes a good machinist, Lizzie?" he had asked, using the childhood nickname only he was allowed to use. "Precision," I had answered confidently, eager to impress him with my technical knowledge. He had chuckled, running his calloused hand along a milling machine with the tenderness one might show a beloved pet. "That's part of it. But the best machinists I ever knew were the ones who respected the material enough to prepare properly. Rushing in with your cutting tool without understanding what you're working with, that's how you ruin good stock and break expensive equipment." At the time, I had thought he was giving me technical advice about machining. Years later, I understood he had been teaching me about business, and perhaps about family as well. Uncle Richard had always rushed in, confident that his position and personality would carry the day. I had learned to measure twice and cut once to understand the material I was working with, whether metal alloys or human motivations. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. James from legal entered with a stack of folders and a concerned expression. "Marcus mentioned the situation," he said, placing the documents on my desk. "I've brought everything we have on the holdings, structure, and what little we've learned about the Vertex offer. Is there anything else you need?" "Yes," I decided. "Could you prepare a summary of Richard's official authorities versus those that would require board approval, and a separate document outlining the process for unwinding an unauthorized sale attempt?" James nodded, making notes. "Do you think it will come to that?" "I hope not," I replied honestly. "But I'd rather have options I don't need than need options I don't have." After James left, I immersed myself in preparation, losing track of time until Marcus knocked gently to remind me of my dinner with Catherine. As I gathered my things, I noticed a text message from Uncle Richard that had arrived 20 minutes earlier. "We need to talk, privately, before tomorrow." I considered ignoring it, but that wouldn't serve the long-term goal of finding a sustainable working relationship. I texted back, "I'll call you after my dinner meeting, around 9. His response came immediately. "Thank you." 2 simple words. That suggested he might be coming to terms with the new reality. Or perhaps they were just a tactical concession to gain a private conversation. Either way, I would be prepared. I met Catherine at an upscale restaurant near the office, neutral territory for the strategy session ahead. As we were seated in a private alcove, I noticed how much calmer I felt than I had anticipated on this day that had been years in the making. "You handled that situation impressively," Catherine said once we had ordered. "Many people would have responded emotionally to such a betrayal." "I had time to process the emotions 3 years ago when I found his notes," I admitted. "Today was just the culmination of plans set in motion back then." Catherine studied me thoughtfully. "Most people wouldn't have had the foresight to create Such a comprehensive contingency. Or the discipline to implement it so methodically. Most people didn't grow up watching their contributions be systematically attributed to someone else, I replied, then caught myself. I'm sorry, that sounded more bitter than I intended. No need to apologize for accuracy, Catherine said with a slight smile. Richard has been taking credit for your work for years. Everyone in the industry knows it, even if few would say it directly. This confirmation from an outside perspective was surprisingly validating. I had long suspected that industry insiders saw through Richard's claims, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly was both satisfying and sobering. What do you think he'll do now? I asked, changing the subject to the more pressing concern. Catherine considered this while our drinks arrived. He has 3 options. Accept the leadership restructuring and find a way to work within the new reality. Fight it through legal channels, which would be messy and ultimately unsuccessful given the documentation, or negotiate an exit that preserves his dignity and financial security. Which would you choose if you were him? I'm not driven by ego, so I would choose the first option, she replied pragmatically. But from what I've observed of Richard, he may find it difficult to accept a diminished position after being accustomed to absolute authority. The third option might be more realistic. I nodded, having reached a similar conclusion. I'm prepared to be generous with exit terms if that's his preference. Despite everything, he is family, and he did keep the company alive during some difficult years after my grandfather died. That's commendable, Catherine said. But don't let family sentiment lead you to undervalue what you've built. Your transformation of Harrington Precision represents the majority of its current value. Remember that when discussing any financial arrangements. Her reminder was well-timed. I had a tendency to undervalue my contributions, a habit formed through years of having them dismissed or appropriated by Uncle Richard. What about the Vertex offer? I asked. Should we consider it seriously, regardless of how it came about? Catherine's expression turned thoughtful. That depends on your long-term vision for Harrington. Acquisition might provide capital for expansion and access to markets that would take years to develop independently, but it would inevitably mean loss of control over the company's direction. I've never been opposed to acquisition in principle, I admitted. Just to the idea of being excluded from the decision and discarded as part of the process. Then perhaps we should review the Vertex terms with an open mind, Catherine suggested. If they recognize the company's true value and include provisions for retaining key leadership, meaning you, it might align with our strategic interests. We spent the next hour discussing potential scenarios for tomorrow's board meeting, considering Richard's likely approaches and appropriate responses to each. By the time we finished dinner, I felt confident in our strategic position, but increasingly uncertain about the personal aspects of the situation. Richard had been a flawed mentor, but still the closest thing to a father figure I had known since my parents died when I was in college. The idea of a complete rupture in our relationship, while sometimes tempting in moments of frustration, carried emotional complications that couldn't be neatly resolved in a boardroom. After saying goodbye to Catherine, I sat in my car gathering my thoughts before calling Richard as promised. When I finally dialed, he answered on the first ring, suggesting he had been waiting by his phone. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Thank you for calling." "You wanted to talk," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm listening." He sighed heavily, the sound amplified by the phone connection. "I owe you an explanation." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You do." Vertex approached me 6 months ago with an offer that seemed too good to refuse. The valuation was nearly 30% above market. Their terms included provisions for customer retention and employee protections. He paused. But they were explicit about wanting their own management team in place. "And you didn't think that was something you should discuss with me? Or the board?" I convinced myself it was my decision to make, he admitted, that I was doing what was best for everyone, including you. The financial package they offered for you was substantial, enough that you could start your own venture, if you wanted. The familiar pattern of his thinking was almost comforting in its predictability. Richard deciding what was best for others without consulting them. Richard assuming he understood my ambitions and what would satisfy them. Richard placing financial considerations above all others. That wasn't your determination to make, I said quietly. This company isn't just a financial asset to me. It's my professional identity, my life's work. I know that now, he replied, and the genuine regret in his voice surprised me. I didn't fully understand what you've built here until I started talking to potential buyers. They were more impressed by your innovations and systems than anything else in the company. Some of them asked specifically about retention plans for you. I deflected those questions. His admission hung in the air between us. It was perhaps the closest Richard had ever come to acknowledging the true value of my contribution to Harrington Precision. Where do we go from here? I asked finally. I think you've already decided that, he said. Tomorrow, you'll present the restructuring plan to the board. They'll approve it because Catherine's investment gives you the votes. I'll be offered a reduced role or a graceful exit. Is that what you want? To exit? The question seemed to catch him off guard. You'd still consider having me involved? After what I tried to do? You have relationships with clients that go back decades, I replied practically. Your industry network is valuable, and despite our differences, you're still family. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken history, years of slights and underestimations, but also shared successes and the complex bonds of family obligation. I don't know if I can adapt to a different role, he finally admitted. My identity has been tied to being CEO for so long, but I'm not ready to walk away entirely either. Then perhaps we need to create something new, I suggested. A position that leverages your strengths without undermining the operational leadership structure. You'd do that? After today? I'm not motivated by revenge, Uncle Richard. I'm motivated by building a sustainable future for Harrington Precision. If there's a role where you can contribute positively to that future, I'm open to exploring it. Another silence followed, this one less tense than the last. I underestimated you, he said finally. Not just today, but for years. I'm sorry. For that. The apology, unexpected and unprecedented, momentarily left me speechless. In all our years working together, through countless instances where he had taken credit for my work or dismissed my concerns, Richard had never once acknowledged his behavior, let alone apologized for it. Thank you for saying that, I managed. Finally. I'd like to meet before the board session tomorrow, he said, to discuss possibilities for this new role, if you're willing. Breakfast at 7:30? The usual place? I suggested, referring to the diner near the office where we had occasionally met in the early years of my time at Harrington. I'll be there, he promised. As I ended the call, the emotional complexities of the day finally caught up with me. The triumph of successfully executing the contingency plan I had developed years earlier was tempered by the sad necessity of having needed it at all. The validation of Catherine's investment and support was counterbalanced by the pain of Richard's betrayal. Yet beneath these conflicting emotions ran a current of certainty that I had never experienced before. For the first time in my professional life, my external position would match my actual contribution. No more working in the shadows while someone else took credit. No more implementing strategies I had developed while someone else presented them as their vision. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter for Harrington Precision, one where leadership was earned through capability rather than conferred by bloodline or gender. The road to this moment had been longer and more difficult than it should have been, but that only made the arrival more meaningful. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge what today represented. Not just a professional victory, but personal vindication. I had protected what I had built, not through confrontation or complaint, but through strategic foresight and meticulous execution. The very qualities that had transformed Harrington Precision from a struggling machine shop into an industry leader. Uncle Richard had underestimated me for the last time. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a perfect January day in New England. I arrived at Molly's Diner 30 minutes before my scheduled meeting with Uncle Richard, not out of anxiety, but from a lifelong habit of preparation. The extra time allowed me to review my notes and center myself for what would undoubtedly be a pivotal conversation. The diner held its own history for our family. My grandfather had eaten breakfast here nearly every day during the 40 years he ran Harrington Precision. The booth in the back corner, unofficially reserved for our family, through decades of patronage, had hosted countless business discussions, from mundane supply chain issues to major contract negotiations. It seemed fitting that this place would now witness the restructuring of the company's leadership. I ordered coffee and opened my leather portfolio, reviewing the documents I had prepared overnight. They outlined 3 potential roles for Richard that would capitalize on his strengths while clearly establishing the new power dynamics. None were meant as punishment. All were designed to benefit the company while allowing him to maintain dignity and purpose. At precisely 7:30, Richard entered the diner. I noted the subtle changes in his appearance from yesterday. The slightly rumpled suit, the shadows under his eyes suggesting a sleepless night, the uncharacteristic uncertainty in his typically commanding stride. He spotted me and paused momentarily, as if gathering resolve, before walking to our booth. "Elizabeth," he greeted me, sliding into the seat opposite. "Thank you for meeting." "Good morning, Uncle Richard," I replied, gesturing to the coffee, pot I had requested for the table. "Help yourself." He poured a cup with hands that showed the slightest tremor, another uncharacteristic sign of vulnerability from a man who had built his persona on projected strength and certainty. "I spent most of the night thinking about how we got here," he began after taking a sip. "About the decisions I've made over the years. Not just the Vertex deal, but everything." I waited, giving him space to continue without interruption, courtesy he had rarely extended to me during our years working together. "When your father died, and then your mother so soon after, I promised myself I would look after you," he continued. "In my mind, that meant securing your financial future, providing employment when you finished engineering school. What I failed to recognize was that you never needed me to look after you. You needed me to see you, to acknowledge what you were truly capable of." His unexpected introspection caught me off guard. I had prepared for defensiveness, for negotiation, tactics, for attempts to reassert control, not for this seemingly genuine self-reflection. "The company was struggling when you joined," he went on. "The recession had hit our traditional client base hard. I was working 70-hour weeks just to keep the doors open and barely succeeding. Then you developed that modified production process for the Northrop components, the one that reduced machining time by nearly 40% while improving precision. I remembered that innovation clearly. It had been my first major contribution to the company, implemented just 6 months after joining. The process had transformed a barely profitable contract into one of our most lucrative accounts. I presented it as my idea at the industry conference that year," Richard admitted, staring into his coffee. "Not because I wanted to steal your credit, but because I genuinely believed no one would take it seriously coming from a 24-year-old woman with no industry track record." "And then it became a pattern," I said quietly, naming what he seemed reluctant to articulate. He nodded, finally meeting my eyes. Each time I justified it as protecting the company's interests. Each time I told myself I would make it up to you eventually. A promotion, a bonus, someday even a leadership position. But the truth is, I became addicted to the recognition, the reputation as an innovator, the respect from peers who had once dismissed our little shop as a minor player. The waitress arrived to take our breakfast orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. When she left, Richard straightened his shoulders, visibly shifting from reflection to pragmatism. "But you didn't come here for apologies or explanations," he said. "You came to discuss the future, and you're right to have come prepared." I opened my portfolio and slid the first document across the table. 3 options, each leveraging your experience and relationships while restructuring operational authority. He scanned the document, his expression unreadable. Chairman Emeritus, Brand Ambassador, or Strategic Advisor to the CEO, he read aloud. All non-operational roles. All vital roles, I corrected, each focusing on the aspects of the business where you excel: client relationships, industry networking, strategic partnerships. None involving day-to-day management or product development decisions. And my compensation remains at 80% of your current package, with performance, bonuses tied to specific objectives appropriate to whichever role you select. He raised an eyebrow. Generous. Fair, I countered. Your contributions to Harrington's survival and stability during difficult periods have real value. So do your industry connections and institutional knowledge. I'm not interested in punishing you, Uncle Richard. I'm interested in establishing a functional leadership structure that accurately reflects who does what. He studied the document more carefully, asking clarifying questions about reporting relationships, board representation, and client transition plans. The discussion was remarkably productive, perhaps the most straightforward professional exchange we had ever had. "The strategic advisor role," he said finally. "That's the best fit for where we are now, though I have conditions I'd like to add." "I'm listening." "I want to be involved in the Vertex discussions," he said. "Not leading them, but present. Whatever their ethical failings in dealing with me directly, they're a significant potential partner or acquirer. My relationships there could be valuable in negotiations." I considered this request carefully. Having Richard involved in the Vertex discussions carried risks, but excluding him entirely might create unnecessary antagonism when we were trying to establish a new working relationship. "You can be present as an advisor," I agreed. "But I'll lead the discussions with Catherine's input on financial terms. Your role would be to provide context and relationship management, not to direct the negotiation strategy." He nodded acceptance. "And I want a clear succession timeline. Assuming this new arrangement works, I want to know when I can expect to fully retire with appropriate recognition for my years of service." "That's reasonable. We can develop a 3-year transition plan with defined milestones and knowledge transfer requirements." 3 years, he repeated, a hint of his old confidence returning. "I can work with that." As our breakfast arrived, the conversation shifted to more immediate concerns. How to present this restructuring to the board, what to communicate to employees, and how to approach the Vertex representatives who believed they had successfully acquired our company. "The board meeting is straightforward," I said, cutting into my omelet. "Catherine's investment gives us the votes we need. For employees, I suggest a joint announcement emphasizing continuity and evolution rather than dramatic change." "And Vertex?" Richard asked, his expression troubled. "They believe they have a signed deal. They have a document signed by someone who didn't have the authority to sell the company," I corrected. "Their legal team should have caught that in due diligence. But we don't need to be adversarial. If their offer truly recognizes the value of what we've built, we can consider it on its merits, with proper involvement from all stakeholders." Richard nodded slowly. "They were particularly interested in your medical device component division. That's what drove the premium valuation. The division you told me was a distraction from our core business when I proposed it 5 years ago." I couldn't resist the observation. To his credit, Richard acknowledged the irony with a rueful smile. not my best business judgment in retrospect. Though in fairness, many industry analysts were skeptical about that diversification at the time. True, I conceded. But analyzing market trends rather than following them has always been my approach. It's why we were positioned for the aerospace composites boom 3 years ahead of our competitors, and why our medical device division is now attracting acquisition interest. The conversation continued through breakfast, covering operational details, financial projections, and strategic priorities. For perhaps the first time in our professional relationship, Richard was listening more than speaking, asking questions rather than issuing pronouncements. As we prepared to leave for the board meeting, he paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "I've been wondering something since yesterday. How did you arrange Catherine's investment without my knowledge? The due diligence process alone should have been visible." "Do you remember 3 years ago when you decided to spend 6 weeks in Europe visiting potential clients?" I asked. "You said you didn't want to be bothered with administrative minutiae while you were building international relationships." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "The summer when you sent all those documents for my signature. The corporate restructuring that was supposedly recommended by our tax advisors." I nodded. "It was recommended by tax advisors. The holding company structure creates significant advantages, but it also facilitated Catherine's investment without disrupting operational control or requiring your direct involvement in the due diligence process. And I signed everything without reading it properly," he said, shaking his head at his own oversight, "because I trusted you to handle the details while I focused on what I considered important." "Ironic, isn't it?" I observed, without malice. "Your dismissal of administrative details as unimportant is what ultimately protected the company from your unilateral decision to sell it." For a moment, I thought he might take offense at this pointed observation. Instead, he surprised me with a genuine laugh, the first I'd heard from him in months. "Well played, Elizabeth," he said, raising his coffee cup in a small salute. "Your grandfather would have appreciated the elegance of it. He always said you had his strategic mind." The mention of my grandfather, Richard's father and my earliest mentor, brought a surge of emotion I hadn't anticipated. "He taught me to respect the material I was working with," I said quietly, "and to prepare properly before making any irreversible cuts." Richard's expression softened with understanding. "Wisdom I should have heeded myself." He glanced at his watch. "We should head to the office. The board will be assembling soon." As we walked to our separate cars, a weight seemed to have lifted between us. Not everything was resolved. Years of underestimation and appropriated credit couldn't be erased in a single breakfast conversation. But the foundation had been laid for a more honest working relationship, one based on mutual recognition of strengths and limitations rather than unacknowledged competition. The board meeting unfolded much as I had anticipated. Catherine presented the Harrington Holdings ownership structure with meticulous documentation. I outlined the leadership restructuring with Richard sitting beside me, offering his public support for the changes. The board members, many of whom had suspected for years that I was the operational force behind our recent successes, approved the new arrangement with minimal discussion. Then came the more complicated matter of the Vertex offer. "As this board is now aware," I began, "Vertex Industrial has made an offer to acquire Harrington Precision. While the circumstances of that offer were problematic, the terms themselves deserve proper consideration." I distributed folders containing the offer details that Richard had provided, along with my preliminary analysis of the proposal's strengths and weaknesses. "The valuation is indeed approximately 30% above current market estimates," I acknowledged. "However, the terms regarding employee retention and operational autonomy are less favorable than represented. Particularly concerning is the absence of any protection for our research and development initiatives in the medical device sector." Catherine, reviewing the documents with the sharp eye of an experienced investor, nodded agreement. The premium valuation appears designed to facilitate a quick, quiet transaction. The subsequent integration terms suggest a dismantling of your most innovative divisions once the acquisition is complete. In essence, I concluded, they were offering a generous purchase price for assets they perceived as valuable, while planning to eliminate the very innovation ecosystem that created those assets. Howard Bennett, our longest-serving board member, leaned forward with concern. So you're recommending we reject the offer outright? I'm recommending we engage with Vertex transparently, as Harrington Holdings, with proper board oversight and a clear understanding of our true value proposition, I clarified. If they're genuinely interested in acquiring our capabilities rather than just our client list and equipment, we should be open to discussions. But those discussions must include explicit protections for our innovation culture and key personnel. Richard, in his newly defined advisory capacity, added his perspective. Vertex has aggressive growth targets in the medical device and aerospace sectors. They need our precision manufacturing capabilities to meet those targets. That gives us considerable negotiating leverage if we choose to pursue discussions. The board authorized a formal response to Vertex, clarifying the actual ownership structure of Harrington Precision and inviting them to meet with the proper leadership team if they wish to continue acquisition discussions. I was named lead negotiator, with Catherine and Richard serving as advisors in the process. As the meeting concluded, I felt a profound sense of alignment that had been missing throughout my years at Harrington. For the first time, the formal leadership structure matched the operational reality. My vision for the company's future wouldn't need to be filtered through Richard's presentation or attributed to his insight. The strategies I developed would be recognized as mine, their success or failure my direct responsibility. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Harrington Precision. The leadership restructuring was announced to employees, who largely received it with relief rather than surprise. Many had long recognized the disconnect between Richard's public role and my behind-the-scenes direction. The clarification of our respective responsibilities eliminated the confusing dual narratives that had sometimes created operational inefficiencies. Vertex responded to our clarification with initial outrage, threatening legal action for misrepresentation during their discussions with Richard. Their attitude shifted markedly, however, when their legal team reviewed the Harrington Holdings documentation and recognized the solidity of our position. After a cooling-off period, they requested a meeting with the actual leadership team, a meeting I would lead as CEO. The morning of that meeting, Catherine joined me in my office for final preparation. You've handled this transition remarkably well, she observed as we reviewed our negotiation strategy. Many would have used this moment to exact revenge or publicly humiliate Richard. Revenge doesn't build anything, I replied, organizing the presentation materials we had prepared. And public humiliation would only damage the company brand Richard has been the face of for 2 decades. My goal has always been to build Harrington Precision into an industry leader, not to win family power struggles. That perspective is exactly why I invested in you, Catherine said. Not just in Harrington Holdings, but in you specifically. In 20 years of venture capital, I've learned that sustainable success comes from leaders who focus on creation rather than competition, on building value rather than claiming credit. Her words crystallized something I had felt but never articulated throughout my professional journey. My focus had always been on the work itself, on developing better processes, improving product quality, identifying emerging market needs. Even my contingency planning with Catherine had been motivated by protecting what I had built, rather than advancing my personal position. Richard joined us shortly before the Vertex representatives were due to arrive. He had fully embraced his advisory role in the week since our restructuring, providing valuable context and relationship management while respecting the clear boundaries of his new position. Their CEO is bringing their full acquisition team, he informed us. That suggests serious intent despite the earlier confusion. Good, I said, standing to greet our visitors as security announced their arrival. Then let's show them exactly what Harrington Precision is capable of, and exactly who they'd be partnering with if we decide to move forward. As I walked into the conference room to meet the Vertex team, I carried with me not just the negotiation strategy we had carefully developed, but the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her position through capability rather than inheritance, or title. Whatever the outcome of these discussions, Harrington Precision would move forward under leadership that valued substance over appearances, preparation over presumption, and innovation over tradition. 3 years of strategic planning had transformed a potential catastrophe into an opportunity for authentic recognition and growth. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had led to precisely where I needed to be, at the helm of the company I had helped build, with my contributions finally acknowledged and my vision driving our future. The Vertex delegation arrived precisely on time, 5 executives in tailored suits led by CEO Marcus Donovan. I had researched each of them thoroughly, understanding their backgrounds, negotiation styles, and likely objectives in this acquisition attempt. Knowledge, as always, would be my strongest asset. Ms. Harrington, Donovan greeted me with practiced cordiality as I welcomed them to our conference room. His gaze flickered briefly to Richard, revealing momentary confusion at the revised seating. Arrangement that positioned me at the head of the table with Catherine and Richard flanking me as advisors rather than decision-makers. Mr. Donovan, welcome to Harrington Precision, I replied, making introductions around the table. I believe you've already met my uncle, Richard Harrington, who now serves as our strategic advisor, and this is Catherine Chen, majority investor in Harrington Holdings and our board chairperson. Donovan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of Harrington Holdings, the corporate entity he had evidently failed to identify during his due diligence process. Yes, there seems to have been some confusion regarding your corporate structure during our preliminary discussions. A regrettable oversight, I acknowledged neutrally, but one we can now clarify as we explore whether there's a mutually beneficial arrangement to be reached between our companies. I watched as the Vertex team exchanged glances, their prepared strategy clearly disrupted by this unexpected dynamic. They had arrived expecting to finalize details with a sidelined Richard, perhaps offering token concessions to smooth over any procedural complaints. Instead, they faced an entirely different negotiation with previously unknown stakeholders. Perhaps we should start fresh, Donovan suggested, recovering his composure. Our interest in Harrington Precision stems from your exceptional capabilities in high-precision manufacturing for medical devices and aerospace components. The quality standards you've achieved, particularly in the titanium alloy processes developed over the past 5 years, would integrate perfectly with our broader manufacturing ecosystem. I nodded acknowledgement of the accurate assessment. Those capabilities represent significant investment in both equipment and human capital. Our titanium processing innovations alone required 3 years of R&D and custom tooling development. Exactly why we've offered a premium valuation, Donovan replied smoothly. We recognize the exceptional value you've created. For the next hour, we engaged in a carefully orchestrated exchange, Vertex outlining their strategic vision and acquisition rationale, our team asking pointed questions about integration plans, operational autonomy, and employee retention. Throughout this discussion, I maintained a deliberate posture of professional interest without apparent eagerness, allowing Catherine to press for financial details while Richard occasionally provided historical context for our operational evolution. When their initial presentation concluded, I thanked them for the comprehensive overview before shifting the conversation to more specific concerns. Your offer recognizes the asset value of our equipment and client relationships, I noted, but seems to undervalue our innovation pipeline and the team that drives it. Particularly concerning is the absence of specific retention commitments for our R&D department and medical device division leadership. Donovan's response was diplomatic, but revealing. We typically determine organizational structure post-acquisition, once we've had the opportunity to evaluate talent against our existing capabilities. We find this approach prevents making commitments that might prove impractical during integration. In other words, they wanted complete freedom to dismantle our teams and absorb only the specific capabilities that served their immediate needs. This confirmed my analysis of their true intentions. "I appreciate your candor," I replied. "It helps clarify a fundamental misalignment in how we're valuing Harrington Precision. You're assessing physical assets and current revenue streams. We're considering the future value of our innovation ecosystem and talent pipeline." Catherine interjected with the practiced precision of a seasoned investor. "To illustrate this, GAAP, your offer values Harrington at approximately 18 times current earnings. Yet our projections for the medical device components division alone suggest it will triple in revenue over the next 36 months based on already secured development partnerships." I slid a folder across the table containing our verified growth metrics and client commitment documentation. These aren't speculative forecasts. They're contractual obligations from clients who have invested in our custom development capabilities because of our demonstrated innovation capacity. Donovan reviewed the documents with growing interest, passing them to his CFO for closer examination. The data clearly surprised them, information that had either been omitted from Richard's earlier representations or simply dismissed as exaggerated projections. "These development partnerships are impressive," Donovan acknowledged, "though integration of such client-specific commitments into our broader manufacturing platform would present challenges." "That's precisely our concern," I responded. "The value of Harrington Precision isn't just in what we make, but in how we develop solutions that others can't. That capacity resides in our team structure, our R&D protocols, and our client engagement model, all elements that would be at risk in a standard acquisition integration." For the remainder of the morning, we methodically addressed each aspect of their proposal, identifying gaps between their valuation methodology and our operational reality. Throughout this process, I maintained a constructive tone, positioning our concerns as mutual challenges to solve rather than objections to overcome. When we broke for lunch, served in an adjacent conference room to maintain discussion momentum, Catherine pulled me aside briefly. "They're reassessing completely," she observed quietly. "Donovan has messaged his office 3 times in the past hour, likely requesting additional analysis." "Yes," I agreed. "They came expecting to close a transaction. Now they're conducting the due diligence they should have performed initially." Richard joined our private conversation, his expression thoughtful. "You've completely reframed the discussion from a sale to a potential strategic partnership. Masterfully done." His compliment, offered without qualification or attempt to share credit, represented a significant evolution in our professional relationship. I acknowledged it with a nod before rejoining our guests for the working lunch. When formal discussions resumed after lunch, Donovan's approach had noticeably shifted. "We'd like to propose an alternative structure for potential collaboration," he began. "Rather than a complete acquisition, we might explore a strategic investment position, perhaps 40% equity with specific technology licensing arrangements for your medical device processes." This suggestion validated my negotiation strategy perfectly. By demonstrating the true depth of our capabilities and future value, we had transformed their acquire and absorb approach into a more collaborative partnership discussion. "That framework has potential," I responded, careful not to show excess enthusiasm for this significant shift. "Though any such arrangement would need robust protections for our innovation autonomy and talent retention." For the next 3 hours, we explored this new conceptual framework, identifying potential synergies while establishing clear boundaries around operational independence. Throughout these discussions, I maintained a careful balance, open to mutually beneficial partnership, while unwavering on the core principles that had built our company's value. By late afternoon, we had outlined a preliminary structure for continued exploration. Vertex would acquire a minority position in Harrington Holdings rather than purchasing Harrington Precision outright. This investment would provide capital for our accelerated growth while giving Vertex preferred access to our manufacturing innovations without sacrificing our independence. As the meeting concluded with agreements for further due diligence and detailed term development, Donovan approached me privately while his team gathered their materials. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Harrington," he said, his tone more genuine than I had heard all day. "We clearly misunderstood both the ownership structure and the innovation value of your operation. Our discussions with Richard gave us a very different impression of who was driving Harrington's growth strategy." "An understandable confusion," I replied diplomatically. "Leadership visibility doesn't always align with operational reality, especially in family businesses with complex histories." "Indeed," he agreed, "though I suspect that particular misalignment has been resolved rather definitively." He extended his hand. "I look forward to exploring this partnership properly, with the actual architects of Harrington's success." After the Vertex team departed, Catherine, Richard, and I remained in the conference room, assessing the dramatic shift in negotiation outcomes. "They arrived expecting to complete an acquisition that undervalued us by at least 40%, Catherine observed. "They're leaving discussing a minority investment partnership that preserves our autonomy and recognizes our true growth potential, and provides capital for expansion without sacrificing control," I added, reviewing my notes from the discussion. "Their manufacturing capacity in the Southwest would accelerate our entry into the defense contracting market by at least 18 months." Richard had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout this assessment. When he finally spoke, his tone carried a reflective quality I had rarely heard from him. "I've been in business negotiations for over 30 years, he said, "and I've never seen someone so thoroughly transform the fundamental premises of a discussion without ever becoming adversarial." He looked directly at me with genuine admiration. "You've been operating at this level for years, haven't you?" While I was taking credit for the outcomes. The simple acknowledgement, offered freely rather than extracted reluctantly, carried more weight than any formal recognition could have. "I had excellent mentors," I replied, thinking of my grandfather and, more recently, Catherine, "and plenty of practice navigating complex situations where direct authority wasn't an option." "A skill set developed by necessity," Catherine noted. "That has become an extraordinary strength." As we concluded our debrief and prepared to update the board on this significant development, I felt a growing sense of professional fulfillment that transcended the immediate victory. The negotiation success wasn't just about improving deal terms or asserting my authority. It represented the alignment of perception with reality, recognition finally catching up to contribution. The following weeks brought intensive due diligence, as Vertex thoroughly examined what they had previously assessed only superficially. Their teams reviewed our financial records, manufacturing processes, client contracts, and innovation pipeline with meticulous attention that validated the seriousness of their partnership interest. Throughout this process, I maintained operational momentum, refusing to let potential investment discussions distract from our core business development. We secured 2 significant new contracts for aerospace components, expanded our medical device R&D team, and finalized plans for a new production facility focused on advanced materials processing. These achievements strengthened our negotiating position by demonstrating that partnership with Vertex was an option we were considering from a position of strength, not a transaction we needed for survival. This dynamic fundamentally altered the power balance in our discussions, allowing us to maintain firm positions on key terms without fear of losing the opportunity. 6 weeks after our initial meeting, we reached preliminary agreement on investment terms that would bring significant capital into Harrington Holdings while preserving our operational independence and innovation culture. Vertex would acquire a 30% stake, secure preferential manufacturing access for specific applications, and gain board representation without operational control. The night before the final term sheet signing, I found myself working late, reviewing documentation in the quiet of my office. A knock at my door revealed Richard, similarly working extended hours as he prepared market analysis for an upcoming client presentation. "Still perfecting the details?" he asked, gesturing to the spread of documents across my desk. "Always," I replied with a small smile. The architecture of agreements like this determines whether they empower or constrain us for years to come. Worth a few late nights to get it right. Richard nodded understanding, then hesitated before speaking again. "I've been meaning to ask you something, but the timing never seemed right with everything happening so quickly." "What is it?" "Why didn't you expose me immediately?" he asked, the question clearly having weighed on him. "When you found my notes about selling to Vertex 3 years ago, why create this elaborate contingency rather than confronting me directly?" I considered the question carefully, recognizing its importance to our evolving relationship. Confrontation would have forced an immediate power struggle we weren't positioned to win, I explained. You held majority ownership and had the board's confidence. Had I challenged you directly, the likely outcome would have been my marginalization or departure, leaving Harrington without its innovation engine, and me without the company I had helped build. "So instead, you created an insurance policy," he observed. "I created leverage," I corrected. "A structure that would protect what I had built while giving me time to demonstrate its value so conclusively that even those inclined to dismiss my contribution couldn't deny it." "Strategic patience," Richard mused, playing the long game when most would have reacted emotionally. "It wasn't solely strategic," I admitted. There were plenty of emotional moments, anger, disappointment, frustration, but I refused to let those emotions dictate actions that would ultimately harm both the company and my professional future. Richard's expression reflected genuine admiration. "Your grandfather would be extraordinarily proud of what you've built, not just the business itself, but the strategic mindset behind it. He always said that machining was as much about patience and preparation as it was about technical skill. He told me once that most mistakes in manufacturing come from rushing the process," I recalled with a smile. "That sometimes the most important work happens before you ever touch the material." "Wisdom I should have applied more consistently," Richard acknowledged ruefully. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I believe this partnership with Vertex will prove more valuable than the acquisition I nearly forced through. Your approach has preserved what makes Harrington special while securing the capital to expand it." "That's the goal," I replied. "Growth without compromise." After he departed, I returned to my review of the partnership documentation, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The contingency planning that had once seemed like a necessary defense against potential betrayal had ultimately created the foundation for a more advantageous future than either outright acquisition or status quo operations could have provided. The next morning, the Vertex partnership became official, with signatures and handshakes in our main conference room. As photographers documented the moment for press releases and internal communications, I found myself standing between Richard and Catherine, the past and future of Harrington symbolically flanking its present leadership. The gathering afterward included both Vertex executives and our management team, creating natural opportunities for integration discussions and relationship building. I observed these interactions carefully, noting which connections formed organically and which might need more structured development as our partnership evolved. Marcus Donovan approached me during this mingling, champagne flute in hand. "I've been meaning to ask you something that's puzzled me since our first proper meeting," he said. "How did you know so much about our acquisition integration patterns? Your concerns about our approach to R&D retention were remarkably specific, almost as if you had inside information." I smiled slightly. "Not inside information, just thorough research and pattern recognition. Your last 3 acquisitions all followed similar integration approaches: initial promises of autonomy, followed by systematic consolidation of innovation functions within your central R&D division within 9 to 12 months. The executives who resisted this centralization typically departed within 18 months of acquisition. Donovan's expression registered surprise. That's impressively detailed analysis. Understanding potential partners is fundamental to effective negotiation, I replied. Just as understanding materials is fundamental to precision manufacturing. The more you know about structural properties and stress tolerances, the more effectively you can work with them. He laughed appreciatively at the metaphor. Well, I'm glad we've structured this as a partnership rather than an acquisition. Having you as an adversary would be formidable. I prefer collaboration to opposition when viable, I assured him. It typically creates more sustainable value for everyone involved. As the celebration continued around us, Catherine joined our conversation. Marcus was just expressing appreciation for our collaborative approach, I explained. Elizabeth has always understood that true negotiation strength comes from creating value, not just claiming it, Catherine observed. A surprisingly rare perspective in corporate leadership. Our discussion expanded to include opportunities for joint market development, with Donovan growing increasingly animated about possibilities our combined capabilities might address. His enthusiasm confirmed what I had suspected throughout our negotiations, that a true partnership, properly structured, offered greater potential than the absorption of our capabilities into their existing framework could have achieved. Later, that afternoon, as the gathering wound down and our guests departed, I found a moment of quiet reflection in my office. On my desk sat a small precision machine titanium component, one of the first successful prototypes from our medical device division, created using the innovative processes I had developed 3 years earlier. The component represented everything this journey had been about: technical excellence, continuous innovation, and the creation of something valuable through persistence and precision. Its existence had required not just engineering skill, but strategic vision, relationship development, and systematic execution. As I held the small metal piece, turning it to catch the late afternoon light streaming through my office window, I thought about the path that had brought me to this moment. Not a direct route, certainly, and not without its painful detours and obstacles, but ultimately a journey that had transformed potential disaster into unprecedented opportunity. The contingency planning I had implemented 3 years earlier hadn't just protected me from Richard's attempted unilateral sale. It had created the foundation for a partnership that would accelerate our growth while preserving our independence. The strategic patience I had exercised, working steadily to build value while waiting for the right moment to assert control, had transformed an unfair power dynamic without destroying the family business in the process. A knock at my door interrupted these reflections. It was Marcus Donovan, stopping by to say goodbye before returning to Vertex headquarters. "Just wanted to thank you personally before heading out," he said, "and to mention that our technical team is already scheduling the first integration meetings with your R&D department. They're particularly excited about the applications of your micro-tolerance process for our cardiac device components." "I'll make sure our team is prepared," I assured him. "The technical alignment between our capabilities and your product development needs is what makes this partnership so promising." As Donovan departed, I turned back to the titanium component in my hand, tangible proof of what could be accomplished when technical excellence aligned with strategic vision. The journey ahead would bring new challenges, certainly, but also unprecedented opportunities to build on the foundation we had established. The business that my grandfather had started, that Richard had maintained, and that I had transformed, would now enter its next evolution, stronger for having weathered the attempted sale, more resilient for having reconciled its internal leadership contradictions, and better positioned for growth through the strategic partnership we had negotiated. The secret investor who had once been my insurance policy against disaster had become the catalyst for opportunity. The contingency plan designed for protection had become the foundation for expansion, and the professional identity I had built while working in Richard's shadow had emerged into full recognition, not through confrontation or crisis, but through strategic foresight and patient execution. Some would call it vindication. I preferred to think of it as alignment, reality finally catching up to contribution, recognition finally matching capability. The most satisfying aspect wasn't proving Richard wrong, but proving the value of what I had built so conclusively that even those most inclined to dismiss it could no longer deny its significance. As the afternoon light faded from my office, I returned the titanium component to its place on my desk, a small monument to what precision, patience, and strategic thinking could create. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in implementing our partnership with Vertex, new opportunities to expand our capabilities, and new responsibilities in leading the company through this transition. I was ready for all of it, equipped not just with technical expertise and business acumen, but with the hard-won knowledge that preparation and strategic patience were often more powerful than authority or title. The skills I had developed navigating years of underestimation had become the very capabilities that would define my leadership going forward. Uncle Richard had sold our family business without telling me, a betrayal that could have destroyed everything we had built. Instead, it had become the catalyst for transformation, not just of the company's ownership structure, but of our professional relationship and my leadership position. His was unusual. Our interactions typically followed established protocols with clear agendas and preparation. Elizabeth, he agreed. He had regretted his actions the moment I revealed my secret investor, but that regret had ultimately led to reconciliation, rather than rupture, to realignment rather than revenge. The most powerful response to underestimation, I had discovered, wasn't anger or confrontation, but strategic preparation and patient execution. Not fighting for recognition, but building something so valuable that recognition became inevitable. Not demanding a seat at the table, but creating leverage that made your place there non-negotiable. That was the true lesson of this journey, one I would carry forward into each new challenge and opportunity that awaited Harrington Precision in the years ahead. 3 months after finalizing our partnership with Vertex Industrial, the transformation of Harrington Precision was proceeding more rapidly than even our most optimistic projections had anticipated. The capital infusion had allowed us to accelerate equipment upgrades, expand our R&D facilities, and recruit specialized engineering talent that had previously been beyond our reach. More importantly, access to Vertex's distribution channels had opened new markets for our precision components, particularly in the defense and advanced medical device sectors. I had established weekly integration meetings with Vertex's technical teams, creating structured pathways for knowledge sharing, while maintaining clear boundaries around our proprietary processes. These sessions had already yielded several promising collaborative projects, including a specialized cardiac implant component that combined our micro-tolerance capabilities with Vertex's advanced materials expertise. On this particular Tuesday morning, I was reviewing production metrics in my office when Catherine arrived for our monthly strategy session. These meetings had become invaluable touchpoints for assessing our partnership implementation and addressing any emerging concerns before they became problematic. The aerospace division numbers are exceptional, she noted, scanning the dashboard. Displayed on my tablet. 28% growth quarter over quarter is well beyond our initial projections. Access to Vertex's aeronautics clients has accelerated that timeline substantially, I confirmed. They had existing relationships with 3 major manufacturers we'd been targeting for years. Having their endorsement eliminated months of qualification processes. Catherine nodded approval. And the integration challenges? Any friction points developing? Some territorial sensitivity from their central R&D division, I acknowledged. They're accustomed to driving innovation across all Vertex partnerships, and our independent development capacity challenges that paradigm. Nothing severe, but something we're monitoring carefully. We continued through our standard assessment framework, methodically evaluating financial performance, integration progress, and strategic opportunities across each business segment. Catherine's analytical precision complemented my operational focus, creating a comprehensive perspective that neither of us could have achieved individually. "The board is exceptionally pleased with our progress," she noted as we concluded the formal review. "Even the Vertex representatives have commented on how smoothly the integration is proceeding compared to their typical acquisition experiences." "Because it's not an acquisition," I pointed out. "The partnership structure creates different incentives. They're motivated to enhance our capabilities rather than absorb them, to support our innovation rather than control it." Catherine smiled slightly. "A distinction that wasn't in their original playbook. Your restructuring of the entire conversation from acquisition to partnership was masterful." "It was necessary," I replied simply. "Their acquisition approach would have dismantled precisely what made us valuable. The only viable path was creating a framework where our continued independence benefited both organizations." Our discussion shifted to longer-term strategic considerations, particularly the potential for expanding into emerging markets in Southeast Asia, where Vertex had established distribution infrastructure but lacked precision manufacturing capabilities. As we explored this opportunity, Richard knocked at my open door, tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to see this immediately." He extended the tablet, displaying a press release from Meridian Dynamics, one of our largest competitors. "They've just announced an acquisition by Greenwich Capital Partners." I scanned the announcement quickly, identifying the key implications. Greenwich was a private equity firm known for aggressive cost-cutting and rapid consolidation plays in the manufacturing sector. Their acquisition of Meridian, a family-owned business similar to Harrington in its market positioning, but significantly larger in production capacity, signaled a major industry shift. "This changes the competitive landscape substantially," I observed, passing the tablet to Catherine. "Greenwich will likely strip Meridian's operations to the essential production assets and eliminate their R&D investments. Short-term, they'll undercut pricing to capture market share. Long-term, they'll sacrifice innovation for immediate returns." Richard nodded agreement. Classic Greenwich playbook. They did the same thing with Westbrook Manufacturing and Peterson Precision within 18 months of acquisition. Both companies lost their industry leadership positions within 3 years. "This actually validates our partnership approach," Catherine noted, reviewing the announcement details. "While Greenwich dismantles Meridian's innovation capacity, for short-term gains, our alliance with Vertex preserves and enhances our development capabilities while providing the capital for expansion. It also creates immediate opportunity," I added, my mind already analyzing potential scenarios. "Meridian's top engineering talent will start looking for exits as soon as Greenwich's post-acquisition cuts begin. Their aerospace team in particular has several specialists we've been trying to recruit for years." Richard looked thoughtful. "Their client base will become vulnerable too. Greenwich's integration process typically disrupts established relationships and quality standards. Many of Meridian's long-term clients valued their technical problem-solving abilities, precisely what Greenwich tends to eliminate first. This development, while concerning for the industry broadly, represented a strategic opportunity for Harrington Precision. It made our partnership with Vertex even more valuable, providing the financial stability to weather potential pricing pressures. While maintaining our innovation focus despite market turbulence, we should prepare a comprehensive response strategy, I decided. Richard, could you analyze which Meridian clients are likely to be most disrupted by Greenwich's typical integration approach? Catherine, would you be willing to discuss this? Development with our Vertex board representatives to assess potential collaborative responses? Both nodded agreement, recognizing the importance of quick but thoughtful action. As Richard departed to begin his analysis, Catherine remained, her expression reflective. 6 months ago, this industry development would have caught Harrington in a vulnerable position, she observed. Had Richard succeeded in his unilateral sale attempt? Or had you not created the holding structure that facilitated our investment and the subsequent Vertex partnership, Greenwich's move might have threatened your survival rather than presenting opportunity. Her observation crystallized the significance of the strategic foundations we had established. What had begun as a defensive measure against Richard's potential actions had evolved into the corporate architecture that now positioned us for unprecedented growth. The very structures created to protect what we had built were now enabling us to expand it in ways that would have been impossible otherwise. Strategic preparation creates options, I reflected. Whether facing threats or opportunities, the foundation you build determines the possibilities available to you when circumstances change. Catherine smiled appreciatively at the observation, a philosophy more executives would benefit from adopting. The following weeks brought intensive strategic activity as we developed our response to the changing industry landscape. I established a dedicated task force to identify vulnerable Meridian clients and create targeted outreach strategies, emphasizing our stability and innovation capacity in contrast to the disruption Greenwich's acquisition would inevitably cause. Simultaneously, we accelerated several R&D initiatives that would further differentiate our capabilities from the cost-focused approach Greenwich would likely implement at Meridian. These investments, supported by our Vertex partnership capital, positioned us to compete on value and technical capability rather than entering the price competition Greenwich would attempt to force. By mid-June, our strategic response was showing measurable results. 3 key aerospace clients had shifted portions of their precision component orders from Meridian to Harrington, citing concerns about Greenwich's integration approach and its potential impact on quality and innovation. More significantly, we had successfully recruited 2 senior engineers from Meridian's Advanced Materials Division, specialists whose expertise would accelerate our development of next-generation manufacturing processes. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, I was reviewing the latest implementation metrics when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Marcus Donovan from Vertex had arrived without a scheduled appointment. Tedded me as he entered my office. Apologies for the unannounced visit. I was in the area for other meetings and wanted to discuss something that seemed better addressed in person. Of course, I replied, gesturing toward the seating area where we could speak more comfortably. Is there a concern with our integration progress? Quite the opposite, Donovan assured me, taking a seat. Your team's execution has been exemplary. The cardiac component project is already 6 weeks ahead of projected timelines, and the aerospace integration has exceeded every benchmark we established. I'm glad to hear that, I said, sensing there was more to this visit than delivering. Praise that could have been communicated in our regular status meetings. Donovan leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to something more serious. What I wanted to discuss is a significant opportunity that has emerged, one that would represent a substantial evolution of our partnership if you're interested. I'm listening, I replied, maintaining a neutral expression despite my immediate curiosity. Greenwich's acquisition of Meridian has created industry-wide ripple effects, he explained. Several major aerospace and medical device manufacturers have approached us expressing concerns about supply chain stability and innovation continuity. They're specifically interested in alternatives to Meridian that offer both production capacity and technical development capabilities. I nodded, understanding. We've experienced some of that directly. 3 former Meridian clients have shifted portions of their orders to us in the past month. It's more substantial than individual client shifts, Donovan continued. There's growing interest in establishing a comprehensive alternative to the Greenwich Meridian consolidated entity, one that combines precision manufacturing excellence with financial stability and innovation commitment. The implication became clear. And Vertex sees Harrington as a potential cornerstone of that alternative. Precisely, he confirmed. We're considering a significant expansion of our investment in Harrington Holdings, providing capital for accelerated growth, acquisitions of complementary capabilities, and potentially establishing Harrington as the precision manufacturing platform for our entire portfolio. This proposal represented a dramatic expansion of our original partnership framework, moving from a supportive minority investment to positioning Harrington as a central component of Vertex's manufacturing strategy. The opportunity was substantial, but would require careful evaluation of both benefits and potential constraints. That would represent a fundamental shift in our relationship structure, I observed. What governance and operational independence considerations would accompany such an expanded investment? Donovan's response was thoughtful. We envision maintaining the current operational independence model that has proven so successful. Your leadership and innovation approach are key assets we want to preserve and expand, not dilute or redirect. The primary changes would involve capital structure and growth resources, not governance or operational control. Over the next hour, we explored the conceptual framework for this potential expansion, discussing capital requirements, acquisition strategies, integration approaches, and market positioning. Throughout this preliminary conversation, I maintained analytical focus, neither committing to nor dismissing the possibility until I could properly evaluate all implications. This is certainly a compelling vision, I acknowledged as our discussion concluded. I'd need to consult with Catherine and our board, of course, and would want to develop a detailed evaluation of both opportunities and potential constraints before moving forward with serious consideration. Of course, Donovan agreed. This isn't a decision to be made hastily. Take whatever time you need for proper evaluation. We're presenting the concept now because the market disruption from Greenwich's moves creates a time-sensitive opportunity window, but we understand the importance of thorough assessment. After Donovan departed, I immediately called Catherine to brief her on this unexpected development. She arrived within the hour, her expression reflecting the significance of the opportunity under consideration. This represents a fundamental evolution of our strategic position, she observed after I outlined Donovan's proposal, moving from a successful individual manufacturing enterprise to potentially becoming the precision manufacturing platform for a multinational industrial corporation. With corresponding increases in both opportunity and complexity, I added. The capital infusion would accelerate our growth trajectory substantially, but we need to carefully evaluate any potential constraints on our operational independence or innovation direction. For the next several days, Catherine and I worked intensively with our financial and legal advisors to assess every aspect of this potential expanded partnership. We modeled various scenarios, identified critical protection requirements, and developed a comprehensive framework for evaluating whether this evolution aligned with our long-term strategic vision. I also consulted Richard, whose industry experience and client relationship knowledge provided valuable perspective despite his reduced operational role. His insights on potential acquisition targets and integration challenges helped shape our evaluation framework. This is what you've been building toward, whether you recognized it explicitly or not, he observed during one of our working sessions. Your transformation of Harrington from a conventional machine shop to an innovation-driven precision manufacturer created the foundation for this kind of opportunity. The holding company structure you established, initially as protection against my short-sighted actions, now provides the perfect architecture for this expanded partnership model. His candid acknowledgement of how my strategic foresight had positioned us for this opportunity represented the continued evolution of our professional relationship. Richard had fully embraced his advisory role, contributing valuable perspective without attempting to control decision direction or claim credit for positive outcomes. After 2 weeks of intensive analysis, I convened a special board meeting to present our evaluation of Vertex's expanded partnership proposal. The presentation methodically addressed financial projections, operational considerations, market positioning, and strategic alignment, providing comprehensive assessment of both opportunities and potential risks. Our conclusion, I stated as the presentation reached its recommendation section, is that an expanded partnership with Vertex represents significant opportunity for accelerated growth and market leadership, provided we establish clear protection mechanisms for our innovation independence and operational decision-making authority. Catherine, in her role as board chair, added her perspective. The proposed structure aligns with our strategic vision while providing resources for expansion that would otherwise require years to develop independently. With proper governance provisions and operational safeguards, this evolution positions Harrington to become an industry leader rather than merely a successful participant. The board discussion that followed was thorough but ultimately supportive, authorizing us to proceed with formal negotiation based on the framework we had developed. This approval initiated an intensive 8-week process of structuring the expanded partnership agreement, with multiple negotiation sessions addressing everything from capital allocation to acquisition strategy to governance protections. Throughout these negotiations, I maintained unwavering focus on preserving the core elements that had made Harrington successful: our innovation culture, our technical excellence, and our ability to make independent operational decisions based on long-term value creation rather than short-term financial metrics. Donovan and the Vertex team proved receptive to these priorities, recognizing that maintaining Harrington's distinctive capabilities and culture was essential to realizing the value they sought from the expanded partnership. The resulting agreement provided substantial growth capital while establishing clear operational independence protections, creating a framework that balanced ambitious expansion with governance stability. On a crisp September morning, we finalized the expanded partnership agreement in a signing ceremony attended by executive teams from both companies. The event marked not just a significant business transaction, but the culmination of a remarkable transformation journey, from a family business under threat of inappropriate sale to the cornerstone of a comprehensive precision manufacturing platform with international reach. As photographs were taken and congratulations exchanged, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led to this moment. What had begun as a defensive response to Richard's attempted unilateral sale had evolved through strategic vision and careful execution into an opportunity that would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier. Catherine joined me as the formal aspects of the ceremony concluded, her expression reflecting satisfied accomplishment. From contingency planning to industry leadership, she observed quietly. Not a journey many would have navigated successfully. The key was maintaining focus on building value rather than fighting for control, I replied. Each step was guided by what would strengthen Harrington's capabilities and market position, not by personal vindication or family dynamics. A perspective that has created exceptional results, she noted. This expanded partnership establishes Harrington as an industry leader with resources to shape market direction rather than merely respond to it. As the gathering transitioned to a more casual reception, Richard approached us, offering congratulations with genuine enthusiasm. His evolution from the authoritarian family patriarch who had attempted to sell the company unilaterally to a supportive advisor, contributing valuable perspective, represented its own remarkable transformation journey. Your grandfather would be extraordinarily proud, he said, his expression reflective, not just of the business growth, but of how you've achieved it, through strategic vision and relentless execution, rather than shortcuts or compromise. We've all contributed to reaching this point, I acknowledged, recognizing the importance of inclusive perspective even while maintaining clear accountability for leadership decisions. The reception continued around us, with Vertex and Harrington team members building the personal connections that would support our formal partnership structure. I observed these interactions with satisfaction, noting the natural alignment emerging between technical specialists from both organizations as they discovered shared challenges and complementary expertise. Later that afternoon, after the formal events had concluded, I returned to my office to review the final partnership documentation before it was distributed to management teams for implementation planning. The comprehensive agreement represented thousands of hours of careful negotiation and strategic thinking, creating a framework that would guide Harrington's evolution for years to come. As I reviewed these materials, my attention was drawn to a small titanium component displayed on my credenza, the first successful prototype from our medical device division, created using the innovative processes I had developed years earlier. The component had become a personal touchstone, a tangible reminder of what precision, persistence, and strategic thinking could create. What had begun as a single innovative manufacturing process had evolved into a comprehensive precision manufacturing enterprise with international reach and industry-leading capabilities. The journey from that initial prototype to our current position had been neither straightforward nor easy, requiring constant navigation of technical challenges, market fluctuations, and family business dynamics. The most significant turning point in that journey had been Richard's attempted unilateral sale, a crisis that could have destroyed everything we had built, but had instead become the catalyst for transformation. My response to that potential disaster, creating the holding company structure that facilitated Catherine's investment, had established the foundation for everything that followed, from preserving our independence to enabling the Vertex partnership to supporting our current expansion opportunity. A knock at my door interrupted these reflections. It was Marcus Donovan, stopping by before returning to Vertex headquarters. "Just wanted to check whether you had any immediate questions about implementation before I head back," he explained. "The formal kickoff meetings begin next week, but I'm available if anything requires attention before then." "Everything is proceeding as planned," I assured him. "Our team is already preparing for the integration sessions and developing preliminary acquisition candidate assessments." Donovan nodded approval. "Excellent. I've been particularly impressed by how thoroughly your team has evaluated potential acquisition targets. The analysis frameworks are more comprehensive than typical corporate development approaches. We believe in understanding what we're working with before making irreversible decisions," I replied, echoing my grandfather's manufacturing wisdom. "Whether machining metal or integrating businesses, proper preparation determines ultimate quality." After Donovan departed, I returned to my review of the partnership materials, struck by how differently this industrial consolidation approach contrasted with Greenwich's acquisition of Meridian. Where Greenwich sought to extract value through cost-cutting and asset stripping, our expanded partnership with Vertex was designed to create value through capability enhancement and innovation acceleration. This fundamental difference reflected the strategic choices made at critical decision points throughout our journey. When faced with Richard's attempted unilateral sale, I could have opted for confrontation and familial power struggle. Instead, I had chosen strategic preparation and patient execution, creating structures that protected what we had built while establishing the foundation for unprecedented growth. The results of that choice were now evident in every aspect of our business, from the expanded production facilities being constructed with Vertex partnership capital to the accelerated R&D initiatives driving our technical leadership to the acquisition strategy that would further strengthen our market position. What had begun as defensive protection had evolved into offensive capability, transforming potential disaster into remarkable opportunity. As the afternoon light faded from my office, I gathered the final partnership documents for distribution to our implementation teams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in executing our expanded growth strategy, new opportunities to extend our technical leadership, and new responsibilities in guiding Harrington through this evolutionary transition. I was ready for all of it, equipped not just with technical expertise and business acumen, but with the hard-won knowledge that strategic preparation and patient execution created more sustainable results than reactive response or confrontational approaches. The lessons learned navigating Richard's attempted sale had become the principles guiding our partnership expansion, creating a virtuous cycle of strategic thinking and operational execution. Uncle Richard had sold our family business without telling me, a betrayal that could have destroyed everything we had built. Instead, it had become the catalyst for unprecedented transformation, not just of the company's ownership structure and market position, but of our entire approach to strategic growth and industry leadership. The secret investor revealed in that critical moment had been just the beginning. The structures created for protection had become the foundation for expansion. The partnership initially established for stability had evolved into the platform for market leadership, each step building upon the last, guided by consistent principles of value creation, technical excellence, and strategic foresight. That was the most powerful lesson of this journey, that responding to challenges with strategic preparation rather than emotional reaction could transform potential disasters into remarkable opportunities. Not through luck or circumstance, but through deliberate choices made at critical moments with clear vision and unwavering execution. As I prepared to share the final partnership documentation with our implementation teams, I recognized that while this expanded agreement represented a significant milestone, it was not an end point, but rather the beginning of our next evolutionary phase. The journey ahead would bring new challenges and opportunities, requiring the same strategic thinking and disciplined execution that had guided us to this point. The foundation was sound, the direction was clear, the team was aligned. Tomorrow would bring the next chapter in Harrington's transformation from family business to industry leader, a chapter I was fully prepared to write. 6 months into our expanded partnership with Vertex Industrial, Harrington Precision was experiencing unprecedented growth. The capital infusion had accelerated our development timeline across all divisions, with particularly dramatic results. In our medical device and aerospace components sectors, our production capacity had increased by 34% through equipment upgrades and process optimization, while our R&D initiatives were advancing at twice their previous pace thanks to enhanced resources and collaborative projects with Vertex's technical teams. More significantly, we had completed our first strategic acquisition, a specialized titanium processing facility in Colorado that complemented our existing capabilities and expanded our geographic footprint beyond our original New England operations. The integration of this facility was proceeding methodically, with careful attention to preserving their technical expertise while implementing our quality control systems and innovation protocols. On this crisp winter morning, I was reviewing the quarterly performance metrics in preparation for our board meeting when Catherine arrived for our pre-session strategy discussion. These preparatory meetings had become invaluable for aligning our perspectives before presenting to the full board, which now included 3 Vertex representatives in addition to our original members. "The numbers are exceptional," Catherine observed, scanning the dashboard displayed on my tablet. Revenue growth of 42% year-over-year, with margin improvement despite the integration costs. The board will be impressed. "The acquisition is performing better than projected," I confirmed. "Their technical capabilities were even more advanced than our due diligence suggested, and the cultural alignment has been stronger than anticipated. We've already identified 3 potential patent applications from collaborative work between their materials team and our design engineers." Catherine nodded approval. "And the Greenwich Meridian situation? Any significant developments there?" "Exactly as we predicted," I replied, pulling up a competitive analysis report. "Greenwich has implemented aggressive cost-cutting measures, eliminating Meridian's R&D department entirely and reducing their engineering staff by over 60%. They've undercut market pricing by approximately 18%, but quality issues are already emerging with their aerospace components, creating opportunity for us to emphasize our quality innovation value proposition," Catherine noted. "Have we seen additional client migration?" 4 major aerospace manufacturers have shifted their high-precision component orders to us in the past quarter, I confirmed. They've been explicit about concerns regarding Meridian's quality consistency under Greenwich ownership. More significantly, we've secured 2 development partnerships for next-generation components that would have traditionally gone to Meridian before the acquisition. We continued our methodical review of performance metrics, strategic initiatives, and competitive positioning across all business segments. Catherine's analytical precision complemented my operational focus, creating a comprehensive perspective that strengthened our board presentations and strategic decision-making. The board will be particularly interested in our acquisition pipeline, Catherine noted as we concluded our review. Marcus Donovan has been emphasizing the importance of accelerated expansion to the Vertex representatives. We've identified 3 potential acquisition targets that align with our strategic criteria, I replied, bringing up the detailed analysis on my tablet. Each offers complementary capabilities, strong cultural alignment potential, and geographic advantages. We've completed preliminary due diligence on all 3 and are prepared to present specific recommendations today. As we finalized our presentation strategy for the board meeting, my assistant announced that Richard had arrived with updated market intelligence for our competitive assessment. Since transitioning to his strategic advisor role, Richard had become invaluable for his industry relationship insights and competitive intelligence gathering, areas where his decades of connections provided perspective that complemented our data-driven analysis. Greenwich is facing more significant integration challenges than anticipated, Richard reported as he joined our pre-meeting discussion. 3 of Meridian's senior production managers resigned last week, and their aerospace division missed delivery commitments to 2 major clients. The cost-cutting has created operational disruption beyond what was projected in even our most aggressive scenario planning. This intelligence reinforced our strategic positioning as the stable, innovation-focused alternative to Greenwich's cost-cutting approach. The market was demonstrating precisely the reaction we had anticipated when developing our response to the Meridian acquisition, clients valuing quality and innovation consistency over short-term pricing advantages, particularly for mission-critical components. This validates our decision to maintain premium positioning rather than responding to their price reductions, I noted, incorporating this update into our board presentation. The quality disruption creates expanded opportunity for our aerospace division to secure additional market share through reliability differentiation. As we entered the boardroom for the quarterly meeting, I was struck by how dramatically our governance structure had evolved since Richard's attempted unilateral sale 18 months earlier. The boardroom that had once been the setting for that pivotal confrontation now hosted a sophisticated governance body with representation from both Harrington's original leadership and our Vertex partners, all focused on strategic growth rather than ownership disputes. The meeting progressed methodically through our performance review, with board members asking insightful questions about integration progress, R&D initiatives, and competitive positioning. The discussion was substantive and collaborative, with Vertex representatives contributing valuable perspective on market trends and potential synergies across their broader industrial portfolio. When we reached the acquisition strategy portion of the agenda, I presented our analysis of the 3 potential targets we had identified, explaining how each would complement our capabilities while expanding our geographic reach and client access. Of the 3 candidates, we recommend prioritizing Precision Atomics in Arizona, I concluded. Their specialized ceramic composite capabilities fill a significant gap in our current manufacturing portfolio. Their geographic position provides access to the Southwestern Aerospace Corridor, and their founder-led culture aligns well with our innovation-focused approach. Marcus Donovan, representing Vertex's interests on our board, leaned forward with evident interest. Their ceramic composite technology would have significant applications across several Vertex divisions, not just Harrington's current client base. The synergy potential is substantial. Exactly, I confirmed. We've identified 14 immediate application opportunities across the Vertex portfolio, with potential revenue impact of approximately $28 million within 18 months of integration. The board discussion that followed was robust and multifaceted, exploring everything from valuation parameters to integration approach to talent retention strategies. Throughout this discussion, I was struck by how fundamentally different this acquisition planning process was from the unilateral approach Richard had attempted with Vertex 18 months earlier. Where his actions had been secretive and exclusionary, our current process was transparent and collaborative. Where he had prioritized transaction completion over strategic fit, we were methodically evaluating cultural alignment and innovation synergies. Where he had seen acquisition as primarily a financial transaction, we recognized it as a complex integration of capabilities, cultures, and strategic visions. The board ultimately authorized us to proceed with formal acquisition discussions, with Precision Atomics, establishing clear parameters for valuation and integration approach while providing flexibility to adapt as discussions progressed. This approval initiated an intensive process of detailed due diligence and preliminary integration planning, conducted by cross-functional teams from both Harrington and Vertex. 3 weeks into this process, I was reviewing preliminary integration scenarios when Richard knocked on my office door, his expressions suggesting important developments. "I've just come from lunch with Jack Mercer," he said, referring to a longtime industry colleague who now served as an advisor to several manufacturing conglomerates. "There's significant movement happening that you need to be aware of." I gestured for him to continue, setting aside my work to focus on this intelligence. "Greenwich is encountering serious financial strain from their acquisition strategy," Richard explained. "The Meridian integration has been far more costly than they projected, with significant client attrition and quality control issues creating revenue shortfalls. Their primary lenders are expressing concern about their debt coverage ratios." This development had potential implications for our competitive positioning and acquisition strategy. Greenwich's financial challenges might accelerate the market share opportunities we had already identified, while potentially creating additional acquisition candidates as their portfolio companies sought alternative ownership. "How reliable is this information?" I asked, already considering how it might influence our strategic planning. "Very reliable," Richard confirmed. "Jack serves on the advisory board of Atlantic Financial, Greenwich's primary lender. They're conducting an emergency portfolio review focused specifically on the manufacturing acquisitions." I immediately recognized the strategic implications. This could create both opportunity and timing pressure for our expansion plans. If Greenwich begins divesting manufacturing assets to address their financial constraints, the market will see increased acquisition activity with potentially compressed timelines. Richard nodded agreement. "Exactly my assessment. We should accelerate our evaluation of secondary acquisition targets and prepare for a more dynamic competitive environment over the next 6 to 12 months. This intelligence validated our strategic approach while suggesting tactical adjustments to our implementation timeline. Where we had initially planned sequential acquisitions spaced over 24 months, we might need to consider parallel processes with shortened evaluation periods to secure optimal targets before market disruption created competitive bidding scenarios. I immediately contacted Catherine to brief her on this development and its potential implications for our acquisition strategy. She arrived within the hour, having rearranged her schedule to address this emerging situation. "This reinforces the importance of moving decisively with Precision Atomics," she observed after hearing Richard's intelligence. "We should also expand our due diligence teams to evaluate secondary targets concurrently rather than sequentially." "Agreed," I replied. "I'll restructure our integration planning to accommodate potential parallel acquisitions with scalable onboarding protocols and modular implementation teams." The following days brought intensive strategic realignment as we adapted our expansion plans to this evolving market intelligence. I established dedicated teams for each potential acquisition target, implemented accelerated due diligence protocols, and developed contingency scenarios for various competitive response possibilities. 2 weeks into this accelerated process, our preparation was validated when Greenwich announced a strategic portfolio optimization initiative, corporate language that signaled forced divestiture of underperforming assets to address financial constraints. This public confirmation of Richard's intelligence created immediate market speculation about which manufacturing assets might become available, with corresponding impact on valuation expectations. Our negotiations with Precision Atomics had progressed to advanced stages by this point, with preliminary agreement on valuation parameters and integration approach. The Greenwich announcement created brief uncertainty as Precision's leadership considered whether to delay decision-making until market conditions clarified. But our established relationship and clear strategic vision ultimately prevailed over speculative alternatives. On a clear April morning, we finalized the acquisition agreement in a signing ceremony at Precision's Arizona headquarters. The event marked not just a significant expansion of our manufacturing capabilities, but a validation of our strategic approach, creating growth through thoughtful integration of complementary operations rather than financial engineering or cost-cutting consolidation. As I toured the Precision facilities with their founding CEO, Daniel Arenas, I was struck by the alignment between our organizational cultures despite the geographic distance and different product focus. Both companies had been built on technical excellence, innovation focus, and respect for specialized expertise, creating a natural foundation for successful integration. Your approach to this process has been refreshingly different, Arenas commented as we observed a pioneering ceramic composite manufacturing operation. Most acquirers we've spoken with over the years focused almost exclusively on financial metrics and cost synergies. Your team has spent more time understanding our technical capabilities and innovation pipeline than reviewing our balance sheet. Financial performance matters, I acknowledged, but it's a result of technical excellence and innovation capacity, not separate from it. We're acquiring Precision primarily for your capabilities and expertise, with the understanding that financial results follow when those foundational elements are properly supported and developed. Arenas nodded appreciation. That philosophy is why we ultimately chose to proceed with Harrington despite the market uncertainty following Greenwich's announcement. Your vision for integration preserves what we've built while providing resources to expand it. Most alternatives would have dismantled our innovation capacity for short-term financial gains. This conversation reinforced my conviction in our strategic approach, focusing on capability enhancement rather than cost extraction, on cultural alignment rather than structural consolidation, on long-term value creation rather than transaction metrics. The principles guiding our acquisition strategy had emerged directly from the lessons learned during Richard's attempted unilateral sale of Harrington, transformed from defensive protection to offensive capability. The 2 weeks following the Precision acquisition brought dramatic industry developments as Greenwich began formal divestiture of several manufacturing operations acquired during their aggressive consolidation campaign. These announcements created a highly dynamic market environment, with multiple potential acquirers evaluating suddenly available assets under compressed timelines. This environment tested the scalable due diligence and integration planning systems we had developed in anticipation of such market disruption. Our cross-functional teams were able to evaluate 3 potential acquisition targets simultaneously, applying consistent assessment frameworks while maintaining the rigor necessary for informed decision-making. Through this process, we identified a precision machining operation in Michigan that complemented both our existing capabilities and the ceramic composite technology acquired through Precision. The operation had been acquired by Greenwich 18 months earlier, and subsequently subjected to aggressive cost-cutting that had undermined its operational stability while preserving its technical foundation and client relationships. After expedited but thorough due diligence, we presented this opportunity to our board with a comprehensive assessment of both risks and strategic alignment potential. The discussion was substantive and multifaceted, with particular focus on the integration challenges presented by an operation that had experienced disruptive ownership transition and operational deterioration. This represents a different acquisition profile than Precision, I acknowledged during the board presentation. The operation has experienced significant disruption under Greenwich ownership, with corresponding impacts on employee morale, quality, consistency, and client relationships. However, the fundamental capabilities remain intact, and the strategic fit with both our existing operations and the precision technologies is exceptional. Marcus Donovan, representing Vertex's perspective, raised thoughtful concerns about rehabilitation requirements. What's your assessment of the timeline and resource requirements to restore operational stability? Greenwich's approach typically leaves significant remedial work for subsequent owners. We've developed a comprehensive rehabilitation plan based on similar scenarios we've evaluated, I explained, presenting the detailed implementation framework our team had created. The technical foundation remains sound, despite operational deterioration. Our assessment indicates approximately 9 months to restore full operational stability, with graduated improvement metrics throughout that period. The board ultimately authorized acquisition proceedings with specific provisions for integration resources and performance monitoring to address the rehabilitation requirements. This approval initiated an expedited negotiation process with Greenwich, who proved motivated to complete divestiture quickly to address their financial constraints. The resulting transaction represented exceptional value, securing advanced manufacturing capabilities and established client relationships at approximately 60% of their intrinsic value due to Greenwich's compressed timeline and the operation's current performance challenges. More importantly, it positioned Harrington to create an integrated manufacturing platform that combined our precision machining expertise, Precision's ceramic composite capabilities, and the Michigan operations' specialized testing and certification infrastructure. As we implemented parallel integration processes for both acquisitions, I established weekly coordination meetings to ensure consistent approach while addressing the unique requirements of each operation. The precision integration proceeded smoothly, focusing on capability enhancement and market expansion, while the Michigan rehabilitation required more intensive operational intervention and leadership presence. Throughout this intensive period of expansion and integration, I maintained regular communication with our board, providing transparent assessment of both progress and challenges. This approach built trust with our Vertex partners while establishing realistic expectations for performance improvement timelines, particularly for the Michigan operations rehabilitation. 4 months into this parallel integration process, we conducted a comprehensive review with our executive leadership team, evaluating progress against established metrics while identifying adjustment requirements for our integration approach. The assessment revealed strong performance for the precision integration, with technical collaboration and market expansion exceeding projected timelines, while the Michigan rehabilitation was progressing steadily, though requiring more intensive resource commitment than initially anticipated. The foundation for an integrated manufacturing platform is taking shape, I concluded after reviewing the detailed assessment data. Precision's ceramic composite capabilities are already being incorporated into advanced applications for aerospace clients, while the Michigan operations testing infrastructure is stabilizing more rapidly than projected. The combined capabilities position us to address complex manufacturing requirements that none of the operations could have managed independently. Catherine, who had been instrumental in guiding our acquisition strategy, noted the broader industry implications. This integrated approach contrasts dramatically with Greenwich's failed consolidation model, where they dismantled innovation capacity for short-term margin improvement. We're enhancing capabilities through thoughtful integration. The market is recognizing this difference, as evidenced by the client migrations we're experiencing across all divisions. This observation captured the fundamental distinction in our strategic approach, focusing on capability enhancement rather than cost extraction, on innovation acceleration rather than financial engineering, on sustainable value creation rather than transaction metrics. The principles guiding our expansion had emerged directly from the lessons learned navigating Richard's attempted unilateral sale, transformed from defensive protection to offensive capability. As our executive team dispersed to continue implementation oversight, Richard remained behind, his expression thoughtful. I've been reflecting on how dramatically different this expansion approach is from what I attempted with Vertex 18 months ago, he acknowledged with characteristic directness. My focus was entirely on transaction completion and financial terms, with minimal consideration of strategic alignment or integration requirements. Your approach has created substantially more value while preserving what makes each operation distinctive and valuable. His observation represented remarkable professional evolution, from the authoritarian family patriarch who had attempted to sell our company unilaterally to a thoughtful advisor who could recognize the limitations of his previous approach and the superiority of alternative strategies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.